Why is gaming just not fun anymore by the comeback
Games
kids?
have always been a major part of my life and really my favorite hobby. I remember my oldest brother brought home a little game called The World of Warcraft, and it changed my life forever. This led to thousands of different adventures, universes, and stories, filling my childhood and teenage years with endless joy and promise. I always thought by the time I'd become an adult, gaming would blow me away. I mean, if I'm doing this today, I can't wait to see the future 20 years from now. But as I grew older, gaming changed. Battle passes, loot boxes, and everything became so heavily monetized.
Oh, and more though, there it is.
Constantly being released broken, buggy, or just poorly developed. Reboots and remasters are a normal occurrence because nothing new ever seems to stick.
This is so true in movies too. Like, I feel like half the movies I see in the theater are either a sequel or a remake of something. Or a blatant ripoff of something as well. Like, there seems to be a less creative process going in, I think is one way to put it.
I still wish to this very day we could go back to that perfect time, because sadly, those were feelings I would never get back again. There are a lot of reasons why gaming isn't fun anymore, and I think I finally know why.
What happened to gaming? All right.
Okay, now the easiest way to understand why something is defective is to compare it to the best version of itself. In order to find out the problem with gaming today, we're going to compare it to the late 90s and 2000s time period where gaming was at its most authentic. During this time, when you bought and owned a game, you could play the complete experience, and it was a very simple...
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Alone, look, absolutely my favorite thing back then about the games. In fact, I realized this when... my power was out yesterday. Okay. And when my power was out, I realized that I can't do anything because not only is my power out, but my internet is out too. So I had this battery backup right here. And what I did with this battery backup is I plugged in my Nintendo Switch and was able to charge the Nintendo Switch enough that I could then put in an actual cartridge of a game and play Mario Party, for instance, right? However, I couldn't do anything with my PS5. I couldn't do anything with my Xbox and all that, even if I had a battery backup for them, because I would need to download updates or install something, all these different things. When I had the PS5 with the Spider-Man, it took me over an hour of once I had the PS5 unwrapped and plugged into the wall, it took me literally like an hour and a half before I could even use the game that I literally owned the disc for. And even then, it made me install the game anyway. Like, fully copy the game, 85 gigs, and that took another hour. So it took hours and hours, even though I owned the system to run the game and had the disc that was the game, I couldn't just put it in and play it anymore. So what I miss more than anything about the old school games, beyond all of this other stuff, is the fact that back in the day, when I had the N64 cartridge, I just put it in the thing and hit power on and it worked.
Simple and fair trade between players and developers. This era in gaming was so great because there was no hidden manipulation, there were no tricks, you paid money, and the developer's main focus was to give you the most fun experience you could possibly have. Developers at the time strongly believed that the better the game was, the more sales and money they would make. Every year, there was a brand new set of games on a wide variety of gaming consoles that
all of these consoles are goated too.
Pushed boundaries on things like story, gameplay mechanics, and graphics. Games rapidly innovating made things so refreshing, new, and it's what led to these games forever feeling nostalgic. Even PC games started to flourish, with popular games having access to expansion packs, giving you loads of additional content available for purchase. This would include more story, gameplay features, adventures, and expand upon the base game that already had a full experience of its own. Expansions like Warcraft 3: The Frozen Throne, Diablo 2: The Lord of Destruction, or Morrowind's Tribunal expansion. Think of it almost like a cheeseburger. You have your basic burger with toppings, and things were still very good.
I should be able to understand this point because I've ate my fair number of cheeseburgers on a daily basis.
An expansion pack would simply add on to that and give you something extra, like having fries, a drink. You knew exactly what you were getting, and none of it was abusive or predatory from the developer's end. Even the simple act of going to pick up physical copies at a midnight release felt like a big event that you never wanted to miss out on. Standing in line with friends and strangers who share.
You know what I miss about these events? Like, look at this, okay? This huge event with all these people is these releases. So I actually worked at Best Buy, little known fact, not once, but twice. And both times during game releases. I was there for like Diablo 3 release, Skyrim, all that. So when these games came out, there was people showing up with literal tents. Like it was an exciting community thing of people showing up to actually do this. They were, I love this game so much. So you get to meet the other people and all that. I know it wasn't necessarily efficient. Like now you can just hit the download button. So back then was kind of the yin yang reverse of I just complained about it took forever to actually make the products work nowadays. But back then you could just plug in and get them. But it was front loaded burden of you'd have to go to the store, wait. Hopefully they actually have it in stock and all that. So there was some kind of trade off to it. But the hype around these new game launches where you're sitting there waiting for the new product to come out. I don't know. I kind of miss that. It kind of forced all of the basement dwellers like myself out of the basement to go get around. Then you get to see all the other people that were hyped for the game. It was a visual representation of your community that played the game. I don't know. I kind of liked this.
Event that you never wanted to miss out on. Standing in line with friends and strangers who shared your passion for the game created an energy that felt warm and welcoming. It finally felt like you were a part of a community that no one would judge you about and everybody could just be themselves.
Yeah,
all of these things just made games great. Everything felt meaningful. Everything felt fair. As time passed, things slowly started changing. As gaming grew in the East, we began to see additional monetization practices being normalized.
Oh my God, Maple Story? Okay, so I'm glad he's going into Maple Story. Maple Story was actually the game that I originally spent my first like microtransaction in back in the day to buy skins, and it was so bad back then you had to buy either a permanent version of the skin or your skins would expire after a certain time. They also had like basically endless amounts you could dump into the game to like reroll items and stuff like that. Maple Story was actually pretty advanced, bad microtransactions back in the day.
Story's gacha loot box system in 2004 gave random in-game items at the cost of real money. They didn't think much of it at first, but the major return on minor development time was massive, and it started to raise some eyebrows on how much they were making. It was a moment in time where investors realized that it was worth dedicating at least a little bit of time not to actually developing the game and making it better,
they were way ahead of their time on the transactions.
In the game to simply make more money from the player after the game was launched. As time went by, the US and Western gaming market wasn't influenced by loot boxes just yet. An almost freak experiment occurred with one of the world's most successful games at the time, The Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
Oh, we're gonna get a horse armor.
The skin was released at a very minor cost of $2.50. This skin was in the form of horse armor, and like loot boxes.
And that horse armor looked like the kid that everyone hated in high school that has like the blonde swooped hair. This looks like Justin Bieber as a horse.
The developers didn't think much of it by releasing it to the public. And after they realized how many people bought it, developers started to think again. The work and development time to make a cosmetic is very small, and the return on investment is very large. A single cosmetic can be sold for less than $5.
And thus the dam was broke.
It can be sold hundreds of thousands of times. The staple of once buying a game and getting the whole game was now slowly starting to change and get twisted. Even though you bought it, you don't have access to everything else inside of the game, and this wasn't fair to players. As the success of additional microtransactions grew, more and more we saw an increase in dedication and resources to making more money. When this happens, they are taking away from development time to make the game better, and it began to spread like wildfire. Fast forward, EA Sports took notice of the success of loot boxes around 2009 and implemented.
Now, I could be mistaken, but wasn't FIFA either one of or the largest earning yearly franchise for a while in terms of these microtransactions? EA also had some really weird patents. Like you can look into this. I've covered this before, actually a couple years back, but they had a patent which basically breaks. I'm going to do a very like not in-depth version breakdown of this, but basically it had it where if you spent money in the game, it would manipulate the algorithm directly after. You would play a worse player, so that way you felt like you were better and you were rewarded mentally for spending money in the game. That's basically what the patent broke down to. It was hidden under other words, but basically the ability to manipulate your matchmaking algorithm, your skill-based matchmaking algorithm based upon spending money in the game was something that EA patented like years ago. And it, I didn't like that one at all because in a competitive game, the second that you break like the algorithm matchmaking part of it just by spending money is like, oof, that's pretty rough. And now it's pay to win where you get power and then you burn your way through matchmaking just by dominating everybody because your character's stronger. But back then, they would literally rig the matchups in order to make it easier for you, which is even fundamentally even worse.
Implemented it as card packs in their brand new Ultimate Team mode within the FIFA franchise. These card packs contain random players at random rarities, and you could purchase them with a form of currency you slowly gained over time. Or by spending real-life money, you could purchase them instantly. The design of making players frustrated with underperforming cards for free and giving you a paid chance to get great cards officially formulated. But unlike that horse armor that you knew you were getting for spending $2, this was completely random and you were gambling because great cards were not guaranteed.
But this is still not the first gambling version of microtransactions, because my understanding would have been that would actually still be MapleStory. Like MapleStory had RNG built into it. They sold direct skins and all that, but they also had a like resetting stuff where you could buy, which would basically reroll your weapon. And so that was, I think MapleStory broke the dam on that still.
I go Van Persie. I'm fucking done. I'm fucking done.
Before they even had the chance to release the next FIFA game less than 1 year later, the Ultimate Team design made more money than the box sales of the base game of FIFA itself. Wasting no more time, they immediately implemented this same exact game mode system inside of their next bestseller, the Madden franchise, with Madden Ultimate Team. What's even worse is the fact that none of these cards and progression carried over into the next year's.
This is the other part I don't get about sports games. Like I didn't play a lot of sports games. I'm probably going to have L takes on it, but I personally didn't understand why I would want to every year reopen packs for the literal same heroes. I say heroes, but I guess they're players. The literal same athletes that I just got in the previous game and in a game that was too lazy to actually make a new game. Some of the games, didn't they get caught literally copy pasting the whole thing where it would still say like Madden, 2017, but it was 2018. It would just say like they just literally recopy pasted the same game and sold it. So that I never really understood the FIFA side of it, but I don't really get to talk. I spent thousands in mobile games.
Game, meaning that with every new Madden or FIFA game, there was a shelf life on your cards that you purchased, forcing you to re-gamble card packs over and over again every year. The net revenue generated from EA based on strictly Ultimate Team modes from 2018 to 2021 generated over $5.5 billion in sales. This is more money made than Skyrim, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Cyberpunk 2077 sales off of their base box price combined. Now, by this point, skins and loot boxes are being introduced across the gaming world commonly. In that same year, in 2009, one of the biggest gaming giants ever, World of Warcraft, introduced their very first microtransactions in the form of pets. These pets didn't affect...
I didn't really think much of this at the time. I felt like the pets didn't really do a whole lot. I don't remember this being terribly controversial, but this was right around, I believe, Mists of Pandaria time, as shown by the monk here. And this would have been about the time I was stepping out of the game.
Your gameplay and were cosmetic in nature only, but cost you $10 if you wanted to buy them. Less than 1 year later, they were immediately implementing more pets into the store and their very first paid mount, the Celestial Steed. It's important to note that this mount
I do remember this mount actually making people mad at the time.
Generated over $2 million in just over 4 hours of being released.
In 4
and
hours?
From that point on, the Blizzard store took off, being flooded with more skins, pets, and microtransactions every year onward. It's gotten to the point now where you can officially buy in-game gold for real-life money, turning World of Warcraft into a pay-to-win game. As the industry began to notice this success, more and more developers were hired to create and invent more avenues of microtransactions. So, with that, the Battle Pass was now born, and it was first introduced inside of Dota 2. This now allowed players the optional purchase of a pass that provided them with various challenges and objectives to unlock more items and generally try to increase rewards the more you play their game. Gaining inspiration from Madden and FIFA's Ultimate Team using a yearly time-gated system, they actually doubled down on this, making it even more time-sensitive, lasting about 3 months. This created a massive amount of FOMO within the gaming community, as these are rewards that you might never see again. This fear of not collecting these rewards after they're gone forever brought you even more dark pattern selling.
Wonder if he's going to get into Counter-Strike. I actually, in League of Legends and Dota, I didn't play as much Dota, to be fair, but I played quite a bit of League of Legends. And in my time in League of Legends, I actually never really saw people heavily complain about skins. I think maybe when the post-fire stuff came out, the quantity of money they were asking for it was put into question. But for the most bit, skins in the MOBA category, people weren't too upset about, because normally it was a free game. Normally it was quite a good game. I think both League and Dota were good games, and people weren't really like massively complaining about them.
Tactics from developers. Monetization was officially evolving. Since then, a wide variety of games and even MMOs adopted this same model, including the biggest being Fortnite, Apex Legends, Call of Duty Warzone, Diablo 4, and New World, each iteration building upon the foundation laid by Dota 2. In fact, it's gotten so bad that what used to be great franchises like Call of Duty have been poisoned, morphed, and Frankensteined into what the game is today by using every single form of microtransaction we've spoke about so far.
This is all fair, and I can't hate on him for hammering on the monetization point. It's one of the most common talking points. It's something that people are upset about quite often, and these are all true points. I do hope he gets into more than just the microtransaction point, because I think there are other reasons gaming has arguably not been as good. Even though we're in a year, 2023, we're in a year of really good game releases. Things like Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man 2, even though I thought it's not my type of game as much. I can recognize it's a good game. Remnant 2, really good. Super Mario Wonder. Like, there's a lot of good games this year. It's way better than last year, in my opinion. It's been a good year. There is other reasons other than microtransactions, I believe, that are making games not quite as good. And I'm kind of curious if he gets into more of that. If the point is just that monetization is the primary sole reason that games are getting worse, I don't think it's the only reason. It might be the primary. I do think the focus on the money acquisition portion of creating games is probably the primary point. I would agree with that. But there are other reasons. I'm super curious to see how it gets into it.
From loot boxes, to battle passes, to skins, to FOMO. They've done it all, and what once used to be such an amazing franchise has turned into a game where you could play as superheroes, Diablo characters, sports athletes, pop stars like Nicki Minaj, and even horror characters in a first-person shooter game about war. During all of this, it's now become more beneficial for game developers to design systems in the game that make things intentionally harder or worse for the player. By doing so, it allows them to directly sell you the solution to that problem through their paid cash shop. And this is known as paying for convenience. The most common examples of something like this are minimalizing your storage space.
Here's the thing. I have a controversial take on this. Some microtransactions are fine as the game is free. If you pay $60 for a game, I believe we should go back to or $69, $100, whatever it is. We should probably go back to the days of if you pay a full price for the game, there shouldn't be anything that actually alters the way the gameplay is. I think D4 does a decent enough job of this where there's nothing in the game that alters the gameplay that you can purchase. It's an expensive game to buy, and if you would like to purchase skins, which are cosmetic only, I personally am okay with a cosmetic-only sales. I do think there is some argument to be made in MMOs, particularly MMORPGs and probably ARPGs, in which if the very best cosmetics that you can possibly acquire are only paywalled, then it de-incentivizes the player to become better at the game for the purpose of cosmetic rewards and showing off your talent. For instance, an example of this would be in World of Warcraft. I forget what tier mage it was, but it was during, I believe, Lich King. There was a tier of shoulders that dropped from Naxxramas that for the mage that had like growing crystals that would like float above your shoulders. And I thought they were so cool that it made me play the game more because I wanted people to see that I had those shoulders. It was very appealing to me. So if there were shoulders that looked way better that everyone used that I just swiped my card, I would not have been as incentivized to raid in World of Warcraft at the time that the game was very good, because I would not have as much incentive to show cosmetically that I've earned something in the game. So that is one argument in which I completely agree with, that cosmetics can ruin a game. Outside of that principle, I am okay with cosmetics being sold if that is a way they would like to additionally make money. But in an MMO, it is debatable. And in situations here, like a game that is free, for instance, with Path of Exile, I have a hard time faulting Path of Exile's monetization system. I say this as somebody who has spent a significant amount of money in Path of Exile. It is a free game that is very good. And I do believe because of the quality of the game they're continuing to produce for such a long period of time, they have earned the right to monetize upon a free game with some additional sales of a higher nature. That is my take on Path of Exile, for instance. Now, if they were making a dog shit game with a pre-order and battle pass and all these things that you absolutely have to have and that actually influence gameplay, it would be a different opinion. But because of the quality of the game they're performing, I think most people would get away with agreeing that Path of Exile is allowed to monetize at the level they do.
And you could pay for extra storage, making the leveling experience slow so you could pay for a temporary XP boost, limiting your available character creation slots so they could sell you more slots to create as many as you would like, making the game map intentionally large or your character slow so you could purchase faster mounts or even discovering fast travel points. Developers at this point are intentionally shooting themselves in the foot, betting that you will pay for instant gratification solutions to their problems.
And they're correct, by the way, people do.
Of course I'm going to boost. Are you really going to tell me I'm going to spend an extra 200 hours playing the game? Fuck that. I'm not contradicting myself at all. Everybody is going to do this.
To milk things even further, major game releases will usually do what is called an early access release to those who spend money on an enhanced edition of the game. We've seen this recently with games like Diablo 4 and Starfield, where you could spend an extra $20 to play the game before everyone else.
And
By this point, the burger that was once pay in full and a beautiful symbiotic relationship between players and developers has now been more and more corrupt by the day to the point where it is nearly unrecognizable. Now, in order to get the full experience of a modern game, you don't just simply pay for the box price. There are now so many systems developed and practiced by psychologists and developers to get you to pull out your wallet and spend more money. It's very simple now. Games aren't created anymore with the full intent to create a great player experience. Games are businesses. The best way to make money now through the gaming business is by using the modern strategies that were developed over the last 20 years. Loot boxes, skins, pre-order exclusive bonuses, battle passes, selling player conveniences, exclusive currencies. Instead of hiring game developers, they hire people to come in and streamline these microtransaction systems with proper psychology to encourage you to spend more money, and the truth is, this system works. When it feels like games today can't compare to games of the past, it's because most of the time, they simply can't. Innovation in modern gaming hasn't become still, it simply switched its focus. It went from what new great things can we make that players will love to how can we make a game for the least amount of money with the most aggressive and manipulative monetization people will accept. Games aren't made with developers whose intent...
It's basically an arms race is what's happening. So you'll have one gaming company that comes out with a new idea in monetization. Let's say the first person that realizes you can sell skins, for instance. Then every other gaming company is going to then acquire that idea and put it in their game. Then another company comes out with something like Battle Passes. Everyone else like Battle Passes work, they put in the game. So you have stacking arms race, basically, between the companies of how to make more and more money. But every time a different company comes up with another way, like this company comes up with early access. Oh, that's a great idea. Now everyone does it. So anytime anyone does one thing for their game, everyone does it. And then you pile on every form of monetization for basically every game. So I think it's the arms race nature of people want to make more money in the next game. You can't fault the companies for doing it because it's working. I mean, obviously the corporation's job is to make as much money as they possibly can. That's how they're going to see it. And they're right because that is what they're supposed to do in the bottom line. But then what we as the consumer believe is that their job is actually to make the best product they possibly can. And then we, the consumer, decide how much money they're going to make based upon how much we like their product. But the mentality on their side of it is always going to be the other, which is how do we make the most money, not how do we make the best product. And you're going to have this push-pull between the people that are buying the product, say, just focus on making the product better. You're going to have the companies on, how can we make the people buying our product give us more money? And it's I don't know how you solve this solution at the moment. I mean, some people will argue regulation, but then there's counter arguments to that. Some people are going to argue just don't spend the money and the market will decide, but then the people that do spend the money are still going to influence the nature. So it's I don't know how you solve this issue. I think there are more issues than monetizations in gaming currently, which I think he's going to get to as we start to get into some of the other points here in the video. But he's not wrong about monetization being a problem in games. It's hard to deny.
Make you happy and give you a great experience. They're created by corporations whose sole focus is on making the most amount of money and fast. And this leads right into another reason why gaming isn't fun anymore. Games are released broken or simply rushed out. Giving developers the ability to patch a game post-release as a live service is really an incredible development that a lot of people overlook nowadays. This means that developers can actually communicate with the community and make updates with balance changes and generally clean up the game to how it was intended to be played. You now have the luxury as a developer to fix, make adjustments, and even sometimes make drastic changes post-launch with this amazing availability of live service support. And you may be asking yourself, well, these are all great things, right? Well, not entirely. The thing is, it starts to get into a real gray area when using this live service support model as an excuse throughout the game's development to fix problems later on. There is a very poor habit that's been built around gaming development. Developers now crutch on the opportunity to fix a game after it's been launched, rather than taking the time needed to produce the best quality possible game.
And this is the fault of advanced marketing in games. Now what happens is you have it from a top-down level of production. Instead of the devs who are actually creating the games being the one that's running the company and deciding how their product's going to function, and they're the ones leading the charge, now it's a top-down problem. If you have executives, and the executives go to the marketing team, and the marketing team goes out there from the rules from the executives, and then they push this product. They put all kinds of promises. They say it's going to do all kinds of things. And they put a release date on the line. They say it's coming out in last quarter of 2024. Then the team from the executive goes, okay, devs, you need to have a game ready by the last quarter of 2024 with this IP. Go and make the game. And they're the ones who are deciding when the game is ready because of the marketing behind it and when they think the best time to release the game is to make as much money as possible. It's no longer the people that are making the game that are able to decide when the game is ready, and they're the only ones who would know when it's ready. So yeah, you're all, because of that and how big the gaming business has become, you're going to have people forcing games that are not ready out because of enhanced marketing. That's an arms race against other companies. Like this own video has shown, the marketing, or not the marketing, but the genre of gaming has become more and more and more money. So you're going to have more and more and more larger businesses in it, which means more and more people see it as a business are making the business decision from the top down instead of the other way around, which is forcing the hands of the people actually making the game, who are the people that should be deciding. That is how I see it personally. It has been reverse engineered. And then that destroyed the quality of the games, essentially, because now it is the executives make the decision to say when it needs to be released instead of the devs themselves actually making the game say when it's ready to be cooked. That's my answer to this issue around why are games released so broken. There's too much marketing now because it's too competitive and too large of a market, and they need to push and be out in time because it's too big of an industry now. They can't take their time with it. They're competing with other people.
I'm not saying that before this revolution, games were released perfectly. Developers just knew that once it was shipped, it was over. The job was done. It was baked on those CDs and it was being shipped. So they absolutely had to do their best to check every corner to make sure the game wasn't full of glitches or bugs. This ship it off and fix it later way of thinking in modern gaming has ruined so many massive title releases as of late. Diablo 2 was released, and yeah, it needed the Lord of Destruction expansion, but it was a stable game nonetheless. Diablo 3 and 4? Bug-ridden disasters, and they both had launches with error codes and game-breaking bugs all over the place. Cyberpunk 2077 was one of the biggest disappointments of all time on release and was quite literally unplayable to the point where Sony actually pulled it from the PlayStation Store and was offering full refunds. BioWare's Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem games were released, and they both had disappointing launches, being polluted with bugs, broken ports with major FPS drops, and just horrifying cutscenes that rarely worked properly. No Man's Sky wasn't a technical disaster at launch, but it failed miserably at living up to fan expectations, to the point where developers lied.
This right here, No Man's Sky, was the first game I was very pissed about on launch. But the cool thing about No Man's Sky is this is the redemption arc of like the fucking millennia. They actually did it properly, which is they overpromised, but there's some argument. In fact, if you watch The Good and Mean of No Man's Sky by the Internet Historian, this is a absolute perfect example of this. It talks about everything you need to know about this, but there was some actual issues, like their whole office being flooded, for instance, that actually had problems for the producing of the game. So they sort of overpromised, but they also had development issues. So when the game came out, things like they said the game had multiplayer, which it would have. In fact, the box itself, when it shipped out, had multiplayer on it, but they had to put over every copy a sticker that said single player in order for it to be legal to ship, because they couldn't say it was multiplayer when it factually was not. Then when it came out as multiplayer, they were still, or single player, they were still tweeting saying, this is a multiplayer game, which it factually was not a multiplayer game. It was a single player game that later then developed multiplayer. However, No Man's Sky has since added, I think, almost every single thing they ever promised would be in the game and more, and they're still, to this day, updating the game free of charge for the people that have had it. So No Man's Sky is an example of live service games actually done correctly, instead of them themselves saying, okay, we failed it, let's make No Man's Sky 2, remarket it, and try to make more money off of it. They literally kept improving the product people had already paid for, and it won award after award after award, and it climbed the player base. People went back and actually rebought the product. So No Man's Sky for me is absolutely the largest redemption I probably have seen ever in the history of game. I would say probably ever, the biggest redemption I've ever seen in gaming history.
Or exaggerated about many of the features the game would launch with. The reason why this is such a gray area is that developers nowadays release games half-promised or just simply broken. Without these live service updates, these current games wouldn't even exist today. Cyberpunk recently just came out with an expansion that's absolutely killing it right now. Diablo 4 should be playable in a few years' time, and No Man's Sky has made an incredible comeback and is easily one of the best space exploration games today. My point is, why should we as the player suffer by spending $70 on a video game release that is lacking half of the features promised, completely broken and full of bugs, or just games that are boring and simply disappointing to play? Why should we have to wait multiple years for games to be enjoyable and make a comeback like No Man's Sky or Cyberpunk 2077?
Fair point.
A video game bought by players should never feel like they are rolling the dice to see if it's even in a workable state. The gaming industry nowadays is similar to the film industry. Developers care about making their game as flashy and beautiful as possible on the outside, without digging deep to make sure the game is solid with good gameplay loops and creative story. And this is why so many people are stuck in this same loop. They will buy a brand new game, get bored of it within less than a week's time, and go right back to what they were playing before. This is exactly why
I feel so called out with that. Like, that is, I have done that for 5 years straight or longer. Actually, to be honest, I've done that since I was, I want to say, finished with Maple Story, which would have been, I was 18, what is that, 14 years? Holy moly, I'm older.
We go back to those games
I feel
of
called
the good
out.
old days, and believe me, the industry has noticed, and they are taking advantage of that now, because all we ever get nowadays are remakes and remasters.
I'm really split.
Industry.
I'm really split on remakes and remastered. On one hand, Super Mario RPG Remaster comes out in 2 days, and I loved that game, and the remaster looks good, and I'm going to purchase it, so they will get my money, and I will play it, and I will probably enjoy it, I would assume, because I enjoyed it the first time. So I feel like remasters are okay, but I also understand that basically rehashing stuff over and over and over again is really boring. I more feel this way about movies. Like, I feel like they redo the same movie or the same concept over and over and over again, and original stuff is fewer and far between, and now it just seems like everything's either a sequel or a rehash, and it feels like it's kind of going that way a little bit with games a little bit more. But then again, at the same time, I don't hate it. like I say with Super Mario RPG, I'm actually excited for WoW Classic Season of Discovery. I guess it works. I think the rehashing is potentially one of those times where maybe it's a little bit of a cash grab for companies, but it might be a cash grab that I'm okay with in this circumstance if when they remaster it, they deliver upon, here's your nostalgia, we made it better, and it's worth buying it again. If they are able to do those things, you know, I for the most part, I probably would give a pass for that one. I'm in the middle on rehash, remaster. I can understand both sides of this one. I'm not vividly mad at rehash and remasters because some of them really have earned my money, in my opinion. So that's just kind of how I see that.
Has always followed certain trends to what was successful. The success of World of Warcraft sparked the MMO revolution where countless MMOs were released with a subscription-based model. League of Legends' success caused new MOBAs to be constantly released. Overwatch encouraged hero-based FPS shooters to come out. Fortnite revolutionized battle royales. Developers and shareholders always keep track of what's succeeding in the industry. The truth of the matter is, certain game genres are just not as profitable as others. And what I mean by that is that they can't implement all of their grubby little microtransaction systems inside of them. The sad thing is, there's actually a lot of great things that come out of re-releasing a game. Remakes are a great way to bring modern gamers the opportunity to play the games that you once fell in love with when you were younger. Developers can even add on to their old project to feel a lot more modern and give a fresh experience. After playing Red Dead Redemption 2 recently, I was actually intrigued to go play Red Dead Revolver, which was released back in 2004. And I gotta tell you, it was pretty difficult playing something that looked like this. And a great example is Diablo 2 Resurrected. This relaunch completely resparked the community and has been a major success ever since its re-release.
This is a good example.
The big problem with remasters and re-releases comes in when companies try to sell you their old games over and over again rather than coming up with something new. With Skyrim being re-released 9 different times, it's become a running joke in the community. Skyrim's Legendary Edition, Skyrim VR, Skyrim Special Edition, Skyrim Remastered and Modded. At this point, it just feels like they're trying to tug on our heartstrings and make money off of nostalgia without even doing anything properly. Warcraft 3 Reforged was launched with HD graphics, but the game was simply broken and missing beloved features that the original game had.
The only difference between Reforged and Classic is this button right here, nothing else. Anything anyone else tells you is a lie.
Is this
Anything
Pox?
Blizzard tells you is a lie.
GTA, the Definitive Edition, used an AI upscaler to re-release the game and had an insane amount of visual bugs. Silent Hill, the HD edition, came out with even more bugs than the original release back then, and took out the game's trademark fog inside of Silent Hill, which left the game feeling way worse than the original. Activision even remastered Modern Warfare and added microtransactions into a game that never even had them in the first place.
First, take a big step back and literally fuck your own face! I am talking scorched earth, motherfucker! I will massacre you!
Oh no.
I will fuck you up!
Oh
In
no.
the past, it was incredibly rare to see remasters back on old consoles like the Xbox, PlayStation, GameCube, or even PlayStation 2, and that's because their main focus was to create a brand new game. It seems as if everything is about money. Why should a company take risks on coming up with new characters, stories, systems, and super fun endgame loops that people enjoy when they simply can just slap a coat of paint on what was once loved, save hundreds of millions,
talking about
and
Halo,
make
man.
a
My heart
profit?
can't take
The
it.
sad thing is that we know it's possible to make a great game. While major game studios continue to copy each other's ideas with their blockbuster titles, we're starting to see the rise of indie developers bringing something unique and refreshing to the table.
You know, I'm just about at the point of faux sin giving up on going from each hot trend and just playing the games that I legitimately think are the greatest of all time and doing like a 1 month circuit of we play greatest games I've ever played in my life. And we play Subnautica would be the first one because that game is a fucking goat. Then we play Super Mario RPG. Then we play Super Metroid. You know what I mean? Like we go down the list of just single player best games I've ever played in my life with a beginning and an end, and we just go down the list one by one by one by one by one. Super Mario 64. You know, like you just start hitting these games that are, in my opinion, actually worthy of being played.
Unburdened by corporate constraints and always having to fill in a financial agenda, they actually have the freedom to experiment with new ideas, gameplay mechanics, and art styles. This results in games that push boundaries and cater to specific interests or communities within gaming. Games like Minecraft, The Darkest Dungeon, Limbo, Hades, Amnesia, all beloved indie titles. Even the highly anticipated Ashes of Creation MMO is being developed and published by indie developers. And while the success of Baldur's Gate 3 is amazing while being a AAA game, the game's primary developers were an independent studio. It is passionate developers looking to make a stand against this money-hungry way of gaming nowadays. And in my opinion, indie games will undoubtedly play an increasingly vital role in shaping the future of video.
Okay, but here's my point with this, which is that he is correct about Baldur's Gate 3, but the difference and the reason this worked for Baldur's Gate 3 is, who would have guessed, it's actually a good game. Like, you can't have if they want to make money and be successful, they can't release a mid-tier game with no monetization. They'll make no money. In order for the strategy of zero monetization, no leveraging the audience, none of this predatory bullshit, in order for that to actually work, you have to make a good game in order to sell an overwhelming number of copies and have a ton of word of mouth. If that's how you want to do it, which, by the way, is way better for the people actually playing the games, so I'm all for it. I'm just saying they have to actually be able to make a good game. Part of this is like, yes, it's right, but Baldur's Gate 3 is not successful because it doesn't have monetization bullshit in it. People might love the game because it doesn't have it in it, but that's not why it's successful. It's successful because the game is actually fundamentally good. From the ground up, it's a good game. So he's right, but also, like, there's another point to this.
Video game entertainment. Now, so far, we've spoken about a wide variety of different topics. What has made games great? The rise of monetization and how it's been implemented. Game releases being broken or simply rushed out. The only thing being done now are remakes and remasters, and there practically being no originality in the industry. And while being true, these are all very big problems, there's still one major problem that we haven't discussed. A problem so massive and deadly that you don't even know it's there. A problem that's like a silent blade in the night. The problem being you, the players. Believe it or not, we are to blame as well. With the revolution of the internet coming into play, it has heavily impacted the gaming industry. Even before a game is released nowadays, there are hundreds of videos and websites out there displaying everything there is to know inside of the game.
I'm so glad he's getting into this point. Like, I made a video one time about, like, why you're not, I think it was called Why You Don't Enjoy Games As Much Anymore or something like that. I put on the channel. And basically my point of that video was, you're not enjoying games like you used to because you're not playing them like you used to. And yes, absolutely, monetization, lack of creativity, all of these other issues that arise in games over the last 10, 20, 30 years are absolutely a big chunk of the problem. Part of it is the fact that we're no longer playing games with a sense of wonder. We are learning about the games as much as we possibly can before it's out. We're min-maxing the games. We're buying the pre-order every time to get in on day one. We're caring about how good we are compared to the person next to us in games that are fundamentally not a competitive game. You know, like, it would be the equivalent of back in the day when you bought a Super Nintendo or N64 game. If you bought you remember, like, they'd have the review book with it. If you bought the review book with the Super Nintendo game, let's say you bought Super Mario RPG or something, you bought the guidebook and the game, and then you didn't open up the box of the guide game until you looked at the book and read the entire book. If you read the entire walkthrough, looked at the end to see what the end boss was, how to beat everything, what the best abilities are, if you read the entire book before you even put the game in, that Super Nintendo game would be worse for you playing it through. But no one did that back then. No one back in the day read the entire strategy guide before they played the game. They were too excited to play the game, so they would put it in and they would play it. They would get to a part that started to make the game less fun because they couldn't get past it, and they would read that part of the guide to help them get past it. They would close the book and they would go back to the game. I never knew a single person growing up that read the entirety of the strategy guide and tried to reduce the amount of hours they would have in that game before they even started the game. So this is a fantastic point by him, and I agree.
Buying a game at GameStop, bringing it home, and exploring something you've never seen is gone. That feeling of longing into a new MMORPG for the first time and being flooded with discovery and exploration is not going to come back. It's because every game you play nowadays has no real life to it. Because months and weeks before the game is ever even released, content creators are shoving gameplay guides, reviews, tips and tricks, and how to get overpowered within the first hour of playing the game down your throat. And it's without a doubt detrimental to a first-time player experience. We, as the players, have become so worried about the destination and have completely forgotten about the journey. Back in 2004, leveling up in classic World of Warcraft was an epic event that took countless weeks and sometimes months to reach max level. It was truly incredible discovering everything there was out there. Endless creatures to fight, dungeons to explore, professions to level up. It was a whole new world that you've never seen. When Classic re-released back in 2019, brand new players were running the same dungeons over and over again to get to max level as quickly as possible. The reason being is because that was the meta. The game quickly started to become only about being the top 1% in a game 15 years old. What used to be about playing a game to have fun, roleplay, and make great memories, now became trying to play at the highest level to emulate your favorite streamer and content creator. And don't get confused, speedrunning in video games is a very popular activity that many people find enjoyable. Being the best you can is definitely something to strive for and achieve, but it's becoming more and more common to do so at the cost of your own fun. Things like tier lists, DPS meters, speed clearing, rankings, and leaderboards, all heavily—
And the thing is here's the thing, okay? So sometimes when I explain this point, I've been talking this point since day one of Diablo. I do very few guides, and I play the game mostly like a fucking noob because I am one, because I'm purposely staying that way because I think it's more fun. I only have one level 100 this season. I have a barbarian that's like 50, and I have like a 50-something hardcore necromancer, and I don't want to grind the game into oblivion because I personally don't enjoy it. But I understand because I have friends. You know, Kyre, my buddy Kyre, that I talk to all the time, he is an extremely competitive person. So what he likes in games is he likes to try to get as good as he can, enjoy the game, become the best he can. And I love him for it. It's part of what makes Kyre enjoyable to play with. He is very fundamentally someone who you can rely on in any game you play because he's going to put a lot of effort into it, okay? So I know there is a certain subsection of people that when I talk about these points are going to disagree because the way they enjoy the game is by becoming as good as possible, as quickly as possible, and that's how they enjoy the game, which is perfectly fine, okay? My point is if you are not one of these people who fundamentally enjoy competitive nature and seeing how well you're doing compared to other people, you are doing yourself a disservice by becoming competitive if you are not a competitive person. It would be like if you go to a gym to work out, and, this is a bad example for me to use. I don't work out. I'm like a stick, okay? But if you went to a gym to work out and you're not competitive, you just want to build yourself better. But while you're there, you decide you can't enjoy yourself unless you do the weight that you see the person next to you doing. And that guy's been working out for 10 years, okay? And that's what he likes, is to be the person in the gym who lifts the most. And you're like, I have to do that because that's what he's doing. You're not going to enjoy your time because you're not worrying about yourself, okay? And I think it's the same thing when it comes to games, at least with this one particular point he's making. Unless you're that type of person, that is the type of thing you enjoy, absolutely go for it. But for most people, I think they're doing themselves a disservice.
They influence players in selecting what's the best rather than what they find the most fun. The truth is that it's human nature to always try and be the best that you can be. And with unlimited information out there at the tap of your fingertips, why wouldn't you be playing the most effective way possible? Because if you don't, other people will. So now all of that brings us to the present. So what now do you think is the cause of why gaming isn't fun anymore? Is it because we make it about being the best? Is it because everything you need to know about a game is already discovered before the game is even out? Is it because there's no buy a game, get the full game experience because there are things like battle passes, skins, and loot crates implemented? Is it because games are not released properly due to live service allowing developers to fix it all later and them being complacent? Is it because there's no creativity in new generational games being released as they're too risky, expensive, and doesn't fit the corporate monetization agenda? Or is it simply the fact that it's all of it combined and it's just an industry in decline from corruption? I'm not here stating that every game out there is bad. I'm stating that it's very hard to have faith in an industry that every single time I play a new game or make content on one, I feel like I'm rolling the dice on $70, whether it's going to be broken or a full-on cash grab. Always throughout my life,
I love that he says broken and then he shows Anthem.
Use gaming as an escape to get out of the craziness of what is going on. But when gaming turns into nothing but chores and extra monetization being shoved in my face, most of the time it feels worse than life itself. And it's the sad truth no one wants to talk about. What do you think about the state of modern gaming today? What do you think is the main reason gaming has changed over the last 20 years? What was the last good game you remember playing?
Okay, I'm gonna answer these because I think that's fair. What do I think about the current state of gaming? I think that we have hit or miss years. I think some years we have really good amount of games that come out, and then most years we normally do not. I think that the ceiling of which games can be really good remains the same. However, it is the middle ground that companies are aiming for now to be a safe, reliable producer of money. I think that it is working for them. I think the gaming industry is growing, and they're going to do what the numbers show are working. What is the problem? I think it's a little bit of everything he mentioned in this video, but that's a cop-out answer. I think what we have to do is focus on the one that we can change, which is fundamentally ourselves. Which I think for me, if I had to only give you one, there, of course, the answer you might be thinking if you're really worried about the monetization side is just stop spending money on these games. We can try to do that. You got to wrangle all the cats in the bag and get everyone to agree on this one. I realistically don't think that will ever happen. I think the cat is already out of the bag. I think people are always going to buy the early access, etc. You have microtransactions, like the name Darth actually says, that it's a problem, and I don't think you can get the cat back in the bag. But what we can try to do is, at least when we get a game, we can min-max our fun instead of min-maxing the game by fixing the later half of what he says in the video, which is stop trying to ruin the game for yourself before it actually comes out. I think that one is easily achievable by yourself and applies to all games. So no matter what the game is, you can apply this same concept to it, and you don't have to rely and trust the company to do a better job. You don't have to worry about what other people are doing in order to make the gaming industry change. You only have to worry about yourself. So for me personally, what's the problem? The problem is all of it, but what can we do when it comes to the problem is fundamentally worry about yourself and how you're going to choose to play the game. And the way I would say that is play it like a Super Nintendo game. Don't open the strategy guide until you've already opened the game. That is my own personal opinion, and I'm preaching against myself here because I am a content creator who makes content for both upcoming games and games that are already out. So I hate to say don't watch my own build guide type of content, but if you're asking my honest truth about it, it probably doesn't help. Now, answer number 3. What's the last good game you remember playing? I'm going to go with Subnautica is the last one that for me felt like it was fundamentally on the level of like absolutely insane games that I'll always remember. And before that was maybe Terraria. Terraria was very, very good. I played this with my buddy Kyer. I remember playing it and just being like sucked into the game pretty fast. Baldur's Gate 3 is too obvious an example, which is why I'm not using that one. I'm trying to remember games that seem fundamentally themselves fairly unique, but I really think I'm going to answer his question here with Subnautica because that's the one that really brings back a lot of good memories.
Let us know in the comments section below. If you haven't already, check out our recent documentary on the fall of Diablo 4 and how I think it's the greatest disappointment in gaming history. I want to thank you all so much for watching. My name is Sky from the Comeback Kids, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.
Okay, so that is the Comeback Kids. This is the second video of his we've watched, and to be honest, he makes good content. I'm going to put a link to it down below and in the pinned comment, and as well as I will link this right now in chat for the people that are watching it live. This was actually a very well done video. I agree with basically all of his points here. I think he went pretty hard on the monetization side, which is fair because that is probably what's driving the industry to do what they do. But I also think we got to focus on the way we are looking at games. That's one point that I've been making for the last 6 months here, and it's something I've noticed about myself. I am as guilty about doing that and ruining games for myself before they even come out as anyone I would preach to. So that's about it. That's my opinion on it. Shout out to the Comeback Kids for a good video.